All right. Let's go over here. Mom, we'll start with you. Number 1.
Okay.
Oh, I'm supposed to read it. Wait for the camera. Sorry.
I didn't do number 1, so I have to.
Really? Okay. Well, we'll start with Mary Ann.
Verse 1. Oh, you were going to read it?
Go ahead. Verse 1 is interesting in its placement. Explain.
It should go with the previous chapter.
Henry and Rona.
Okay. So what is verse 1? Verse 1 was, and the word of Samuel came to all Israel. And we talked about how if you put it with this chapter, it makes it appear as though Samuel had something to do with initiating the war with the Philistines. And that's very confusing because that's in fact not at all what happened. So how it seems very reasonable that the placement of that particular verse would go with the chapter in front of it where Samuel begins his ministry. It goes about that. Ramona, there's some from last week.
Okay.
And there's questions are right here. I don't know what they got over there, so please just help yourself. So, in fact, and so it established him as a prophet. All right, number 2, that would be you, Francie.
Okay. Israel and the Philistines are going to battle. Where do the Hebrews set up the battle camp, and where do the Philistines set up their battle camp? Hebrews camped beside Ebenezer, and the Philistines in Aphek.
There you go. So just an important thing to recognize the names of those 2 cities. We saw on the map they're not very far apart, just the dividing line between the Philistine land and Israel, and they were just kind of opposite of each other within just a few miles, close enough to where they could hear each other's camps when they make a lot of noise. All right. So, and then the interesting thing that we, let's see, let me double check. Oh, yep, there it is right there. The second part of that one is what? Tell me what you know about the meaning of the name of the Hebrew camp.
Ebenezer means stone of help.
Rock of help.
Okay.
Rock of help. And we talked about the fact that it would be chapter 7 before it actually gets named. Samuel is going to place a stone, a rock, there as a memorial because God is going to help them in this battle. And it is called Ebenezer, or rock and help, are the 2 Hebrew words, rock of help. And so that it in this particular chapter, even though it's given a name, it isn't actually named until chapter 7. All right, Sherry, this battle had 2 parts. In the first part, how many Hebrews were killed?
About 4,000 men.
Yes.
And what did that cause them to do?
Yes.
The elder said, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines?
Okay.
Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord from Shiloh to us. When it comes among us, it may save us from the hands of our enemies."
All right. So it caused them to what? Panic. Whenever, well, not in this particular case. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead on that one. So how many Hebrews were killed was 4,000. It did cause them to panic whenever they recognized that God had gone against them, and they sent word asking for the ark to be brought into the battleground, thinking what?
That the ark would save them.
Okay, all right. Number 4, go right into that. Yep.
And had this ever been done before? No. And was this the right thing to do? No. Israel was slaughtered. There were 30,000 soldiers were killed. And it was man's plan and not the Lord's.
Okay, all right. Now, had it ever been done before?
Yes.
It had been
it
done
had been
before. We talked about the Battle of Jericho was one of the times when the Ark of the Covenant was brought out. Also, there's a couple of times in history where the Ark of the Covenant was actually used. God told them to use it, and so it had been used appropriately in times. What made this different was kind of what you were talking about, is that they were trusting in this ark to be a good luck charm for them, and they didn't wait for God's instruction. They simply just said, "Hey, I know what let's do." That's a really bad thing if you ever hear anybody say that. "Hey, I know what let's do," and they don't have scripture to back it up, then you know it's probably not a good idea.
Did you think they thought that the there was power. I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they
Ab-
thought there was power.
Absolutely, and we spent a lot of time last week talking about the fact that one of the main issues that this did was show that the Hebrews had now relegated God to this box that's the size of my coffee table, that he lived in this box and that the power was in this box. So they lost sight of the concept that God was everywhere. That God was present, he was present in everywhere and continued to be with them. And we're going to see some more examples of that today, that they just couldn't understand. If the ark was not there, then the presence of the Lord was gone.
Kind of like a genie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the little genie in the bottle sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
I guess where I was going from was from verse 7, because it says, "Woe to us, for such a thing has never happened."
right.
That was the Philistines.
And that's the Philistines talking,
Yeah.
and the Philistines in their battles with Israel had not had the ark brought into it, and so it had not happened to them. But as far as God using it with the Hebrews, we do have some examples of Him using the ark with them. So, but I can see where that would be easy to, yeah, absolutely, that'd be easy to do. All right, number 4. Wherever we're at, I think we're back over here, Bon. And did you hit that? Did you do it?
I think I know the answer.
Okay, go ahead.
Number 5.
Yeah.
Number 5. Do you have that one?
Wasn't it Hophni and Phineas?
Yes.
You want to read it?
Oh, who came with the ark? Hophni and Phineas. And how did the people respond when it arrived? They cheered and thought it was their defeat was sure.
Okay, so who came with the ark was Hophni and Phineas. Remember who they were?
Sons of Eli.
Sons of Eli, good sons, bad sons?
Bad sons.
Really
Very
bad sons
bad.
that had done, and they're also, because they're sons of Eli, we know that they're priests, right? And so they come with the ark. Why would they come with the ark?
Because they're priests and
Okay.
they carry it.
And so they carry it on the poles. This is going to be important in today's lesson that we recognize that. So you have the picture in your packet where the priests would carry it. It was never to be handled. It was never to have it had golden rings on it, but they were not to be picked up by the golden rings. There were to be poles, golden poles that were placed through the rings, and then the 4 priests would hold it on their shoulders, and that's how it would be carried. And so Hophni and Phineas, we were speculating last week, you could imagine them being there saying, hey, well, let us go. We'll take it into battle. In fact, we're the front priests carrying it in there, very proud of themselves. So when you picture it that way, that the ark is being carried in, not under God's instructions, under man's demands that God do it, and being led by 2 priests who were known to be unrighteous and doing terrible things that they were being called on the carpet for by Samuel, then it makes perfect sense to us that this is probably not going to go well at all. And so when it comes into the camp, and we're talking about the camp of Ebenezer where the battleground is, the people erupt into the cheer because they assume that once the ark is there, we win. Victory.
They really believed it because they shouted so loudly that the earth shook.
That's right.
Loud.
So they're very, very, very loud, and they truly do believe what's going on. We also know that there's a huge amount of men here, because later on, I'm not going to jump ahead, but later on we're going to find out that there's, tens of thousands of men in this battle that are killed, so that means there's a lot of others. So there's a huge amount of people. So that was the response of the Hebrews. Number 6 tells us,
Okay, how did the Philistines react? Is this surprising? And explain. They reacted with fear because they believed that God has come into the camp, the gods of the Hebrews, with the arrival of the ark. They remembered how God had delivered his people from the Egyptians, how he had caused plagues and pestilence to come into Egypt.
mm-hmm. Right. And what was the term? What was the term they used several times in there? I think 4 different times. Woe to us. In other words, oh man, this is bad. This is really bad. So the God of Israel, the powerful God that they remembered from the time of Egypt, had come. Remember, we talked about the fact that Egypt was 300 years earlier, and it was still being discussed as the people recognized that the God of Israel had done that. And so it was It was something that was being discussed in the nations. And then, so because of that, it spurred them on in a really unusual way. What was the unusual way it spurred the Philistines on?
Well, they, rather than running in fear, they were told to man up and fight and not end up becoming slaves like the Hebrews had been slaves.
That's right, which is really interesting when you stop and think about it, isn't it? That they knew that it was the powerful God of Israel. They were, woe is us, woe is us, woe is us. And then they said, okay, come on, man up, like you said, let's go in and fight this. So that's kind of an unusual response. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately for the Hebrews, it is going to work well for them. All right, number 7. Mom?
Okay, terrible results now occur from the second part of the battle. What happened? And they were told to conduct themselves like men and fight Israel. They lost 30,000 men. The ark was captured, and Eli's 2 sons died.
Okay,
Is that what you want?
those are the terrible results of that battle. 30,000. Now, is that 30,000 Hebrews or Philistines? Hebrews.
Yeah.
30,000 Hebrews are going to be slaughtered. And for all outside appearances, it appears that not only is Israel defeated, but what? Israel's God is defeated. And so their actions have placed God in a situation to where in the outside world, it appears that God has been defeated. Now, God's not going to let that stand, and he's going to show them what the true picture is here, but for the moment, it's...
Well, wasn't the horrible thought for them was that they're more than Eli's sons dying and all of that was that the fact that the ark had been captured.
Well, and yes, it is going to be a terrible thing for them, exactly. And so but in doing that, it appears that their God is defeated. He's going to go into exile. Everything, if all of the power is in the ark, then that leaves you empty-handed, right? And so you basically have nothing. Let's finish out some of these questions and we'll get to some more of that. 8.
A man who had escaped the battle ran to Shiloh to report. What news did he bring? What happened when he gave the report? He gave the report about the 30,000 killed and the 2 sons of Eli killed and the ark captured and Eli fell over dead.
Okay, so all the things that Mom just talked about. Now, does anyone remember from what tribe this man was? Who came to them?
Benjamin.
Benjamin. Isn't it interesting that that's mentioned in here, that a man from the tribe of Benjamin. Now, in rabbinic tradition, in the writings, they believe that this man was Saul, who eventually is going to become the king. The Bible, the scripture doesn't say that. I'm just telling you that's rabbinic tradition, that this man is Saul. And that's the only reason, that's how I can remember that he was from the tribe of Benjamin, because I know that they have that. That he's running from the battle of, that's being held in the Ebenezer area and running back where? Where does he run to?
Shiloh.
He goes to Shiloh. Anybody remember how long that distance was? We
20
talked
miles.
about 20 miles. Good. 20 miles uphill.
Wow.
20 miles from uphill that this man has run to give this information to Eli, and he has to give him all the news that we just discussed. Israel is defeated. 30,000 people are slaughtered. The Ark of the Covenant has been captured and taken. And oh, by the way, your 2 sons both were killed. So that's a pretty bad news. And so I didn't have it here, but what happens?
Eli fell over dead.
He falls over dead.
Backward, his neck is broken.
He falls out of the chair and his neck is broken.
And he's very heavy.
Mom really has a problem with that. The Bible tells us that he's old and heavy. And
do we notice that? Really, because I know we were talking about that last week and the meat and the fat, but does that really refer to heavy physically, or could it have been emotionally?
Well, I'm sure he was emotionally. His sons had died and everything.
Yeah.
No, but I mean,
Like, heavy-hearted
Yeah.
or something like that.
Even
I
more than
honestly,
that.
what I think that it's trying to say there is that the falling over, he was so big that he hit so hard that his neck literally slapped. A little person can fall, maybe without all of that weight falling on them, you wouldn't have the same horrible
So
accident.
it really is a physical heaviness.
I think that it really is talking about he was old and he was big, you know, and when he fell, his neck just
He was
snapped.
sitting on that fence. He shouldn't have been sitting up there on that.
Well, he was
whatever it
sitting,
was.
waiting for news to come. And so it's a horrible day with all the things that are going on. But then it even gets a little bit worse here with question number 9,
Now,
Francie.
can I ask something? Now, Eli, Samuel told Eli that his sons would
Yes.
be killed and whatever.
Yes.
So he might have had an inkling.
Oh, he absolutely knew, because it's the second time that he was told. Samuel tells him once, but previous to that, it's the man of God who comes and tells him what's going to happen. And do you remember Eli's response? He says, it's God. Let him do what he thinks is right. And so in his heart of hearts as the high priest, Samuel knows that his sons are wrong. And he knows that Eli knows that his sons are wrong.
Yeah.
And so to him, he recognizes that it is the justice and righteousness of God that his sons are going to be taken. And he says, let God do what is right for him. Then in this particular chapter, we're given another hint when it says he fell when the news of the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
He was waiting to hear on the news of the Ark of the Covenant. So the fact that his sons died was horrible, but really it's that the ark was captured that was the devastating portion of that. All right, and so number 9?
Phinehas's poor wife went into labor with the news. What is her story? She named her child Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." That's all I have.
Okay, so she is ready to give birth to a child. She hears all of this news of all these things that have happened, and what happens?
She died.
She goes into labor, gives birth to a little boy.
And died.
She names him.
You
and
really
then
want that
dies.
she died to get in there. But before that, the midwives come and say, "Hey, you've got a boy," and said she had no joy in the fact that she had given birth to a boy. And then she names him. We're going into number 10, but she names him Ichabod, and then she dies. And so it's sort of an exclamation point to this whole sad scenario of just about everyone involved in this is falling prey to what's going on, to the decisions that they've made. It's sort of like the judgment that's occurred. And so number 10, let's just put that in there with it. Sherry?
She named her son Ichabod, which means the glory has departed. She believes that the Lord had departed Israel, or God had departed Israel. Had it actually departed, remembering our Ezekiel study, how do we know that she was not totally correct? And I just keep thinking the millennial kingdom.
Okay.
Okay.
That's part of it. So Ichabod, she says, because the glory of the Lord has departed, it is why she names him Ichabod. In Hebrew, it literally means no glory. And so she named her son Ichabod, which means no glory in Hebrew. She believed that, and you said the glory, the Shekinah glory of the Lord, that physical, visible manifestation of God that sat between the two cherubs in the Ark of the Covenant, had departed Israel. So she thinks that the Shekinah glory is now in exile, right? It's been captured. So in the eyes of the Philistines, the Hebrew God had been defeated. But even in the eyes of the Hebrews, what do they think?
Yeek.
The same, right?
Yeah.
They think that God has been defeated because the box has been taken. And so she believes that the Shekinah glory has departed. Now the question was, has it actually departed? And the answer to that is no, because when we did our Ezekiel study, chapter 8 is where it started. Chapter 8, 9, and 10, we learned what? That the Shekinah... Go ahead.
Shekinah glory resided in the temple
Okay.
in Jerusalem.
And it wasn't until Ezekiel 8, 9, and 10, that the Shekinah glory begins to leave.
Yeah.
We see it
backside.
slowly begin to leave out of the temple and leave. And we talked about it when we were in Ezekiel. That's one of the very saddest days in Israel's history, because the Shekinah glory, that physical, visible manifestation of God on earth to meet with his people, left Israel during that time. Keep in mind that we're 500 years apart in your story. Samuel is 500 years earlier than Ezekiel was, so that's roughly. So it hasn't left. The Shekinah glory hasn't left Israel, but to them, because the box is gone, they believe that it has left. And God is going to need to change that thinking in their minds, but we're going to see that the capture of the Ark of the Covenant has a very strong effect on Israel, and it's going to change their history. And just in a chapter or two, we're going to see that the fact that they are so frightened by what has happened, that God has left them because the Ark of the Covenant has gone, that they're going to do some really extreme things that we're going to see. Now, just a final note on that. The Shekinah glory leaves in Ezekiel 8, 9, and 10. We saw that. And does anyone remember when the Shekinah glory returns to Israel?
When the Lord comes back.
Actually, when Jesus
When
came.
Jesus comes.
When Jesus came, he was the physical, visible manifestation of God on earth, who came to tabernacle with the people of Israel when he was born and lived. So that's the next time that we see the Shekinah glory come to Israel, is through Jesus. Now, getting to what you guys were talking about, that we will see that again in the millennial kingdom at a later date, but don't miss the importance of the fact that God comes back in a physical way with the presence of Jesus.
How many years are we talking about between Ezekiel and?
We're talking about,
Christ?
again, another almost 600 years. So that presence, that Shekinah glory, that physical presence of God was gone.
Okay, so then when Jesus was crucified,
Yes.
what, is that when the Shekinah glory left again?
Well, he comes. No, it would be during his ascension back into heaven is when the Shekinah glory comes, because he still has things that he's going to do and things that need to be accomplished then. So at his ascension back into heaven, the Shekinah glory leaves, but it will return again at a future date.
So it doesn't exist now?
Not the physical manifestation, physical presence of God on earth.
Okay.
There's not anything that we can touch like you could have touched Jesus during the days of Jesus. And so that doesn't exist for us today. So we live in a different realm. We live by what? Faith. Right? Blessed are those who have seen and believed, but far more blessed are those who have not seen and still believe. And that's us. Because we don't have anything to reach out and touch. Although in religions, man has tried to make that, haven't they? There's all kinds of things that you can touch and feel and have in your hand, and in Christianity, and kiss. And kiss. That's a good point. I mean, when you're in Israel and you see those people taking what they believe is the place where Jesus' body was laid and stuff, and kissing on it and rubbing on it and laying things on it. When at the Star of the Nativity, where supposedly the manger of Jesus was, they would put their checkbooks on the star to bless the checkbooks. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people try and do to get that touchy-feely. We need something to prove that our faith is real.
Blackstone, I think.
Yes, exactly.
But that's the same as bringing the ark in. I mean,
Yes.
trying to force God to do something.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's the way that man's mind works, which adds a little bit of level to that whole idea of blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. Because God knows that's faith. That's what true faith is that you don't have to have anything that you touch and see. So, kind of exciting. All right. Very good. Let's start with chapter